Good evening. Welcome to our webinar series. My name is Kathy Miller, and I am the Director of Community Services here at the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University, and I'm so pleased you can join us this evening. I wanted to let you know that funding for this project comes from Pennsylvania's Developmental Disabilities Council. Tonight, I am so pleased that we are going to have a session on cyber safety, and Dr. Brian Regli is one of the principals of Drakontas Limited, where he has been working with the U.S. Department of Justice for a number of years in the area of cyber safety. So we're so pleased that he is going to be able to share his expertise with us, and he'll tell you a little more about himself. But I would first like to tell you about this project that is bringing this webinar to us this evening. Competence and Confidence Partners in Policymaking, Family Leadership, and Inclusive Education for Non-Traditional Schools, which we fondly refer to as C2P2, is designed for families of students with disabilities who are educated in home schools, cyber charter schools, private schools, as well as parochial schools. The goal of the program is to create a network of family leaders who will work together with educators and administrators to champion inclusive practices for children with disabilities in the non-traditional school community. Project activities include online leadership development training, such as this evening's program. We also provide free one-on-one parent consultation support from trained parent consultants. We have online resources on our website, and I'm encouraging you all to register for our live session, which will be happening on Saturday, May 9th at Vision for Equality here in Philadelphia. So any of those of you who are local who would like to attend, the session is going to be on transitions from secondary schools, and it's going to be a really wonderful lineup. This is our 7th webinar. So we have 6 of our webinars that are archived on our website. So you can see on the screen, the last webinar that we had was done by Anne-Marie Clark, Dr. Clark from SPIN, who did Understanding Evaluation. What do the results mean for your child? Before that, Dr. Regli's wife, Tanya, and Kathy Raccia-Meyer, our project coordinator, talked about community connection. Before that, we had Teamwork for Success. How do you work as a parent, as a family member with the professionals in the school setting? How do you work with those administrators to really have a great relationship with your teachers and administrators in your child's school? One of our most popular sessions was by Maura McIlerney, who is a staff attorney at the Education Law Center, where she talks about your child's rights, learning the laws and rules to support your child's education. Before that, we had a number of families whose children experience disabilities, talking about what is inclusion, how do you support all abilities of students learning together. And our first session, which is an integral piece in really creating a vision for your child's future, really what is that vision that you have for your child? So all of these are available on our website. And as I mentioned, our transition forum is happening at Vision for Equality on May 9th. So you'll see that the web link is below, and I'm going to read it to you. It's http://backslash.temple.edu/family.html. If you go to that, you can register for that very informative session that we will be having shortly in the next few months. I wanted to elaborate a bit on our one-on-one parent consultation that is available to folks. It is entirely free, and any families participating in this training may call us and request guidance and technical assistance. We will match you with a parent consultant from one of our primary partners, Pennsylvania's Education for All Coalition, commonly referred to as PEAK. PEAK consultants can assist you with locating resources and supports, helping you understand what your child's rights are, reviewing your child's individual education plan, helping you develop strategies to support your child's inclusive education, suggestions and ideas for accommodations, and supports for your child's specific needs. They may attend, and you may request them to attend an IEP meeting with you during transition or secondary transition. Again, these are all trained consultants who happen to be family members of children who also experience disabilities. So it's a wonderful resource, and we encourage you to contact us if you're interested in such a service. Support, as I mentioned, can be offered in person, over the phone, or even email, so it all depends on your need. So if you need to request a parent consultant, you can go to our project website. It's right there. I'm not going to read it again, but please complete the form if you would like that service, because we'd be happy to provide a support to you. Another component of this project is that we have online resources. One of the ways that you can connect with us online is by joining our Facebook page, and it's a closed group, which means that it's not, there is a membership requirement. All you need to do is click Join Group, and your request would be accepted within a few days. The reason we have a closed group is so that there is a modicum of confidentiality there, so you can really discuss whatever issues with one another, and our project coordinator and other experts are available to provide you with some discussion and some good answers to some of your questions. If you need some more information about C2P2 FL, as again, Competence and Confidence, Partners in Policy Making, Family Leadership, Kathy Raccia-Meyer is our very competent family education coordinator here at the Institute on Disabilities, and this program is in her portfolio. You see all of Kathy's numbers there. We have a TTY number, a fax number, and Kathy's personal email address. In fact, I want to note for those of you who may be joining us this evening via a cell phone and you have some questions that you might want to pose and you aren't able to get online, you can either call Kathy or you can send her an email on this very email that's posted here, Kathy with a C, rm@temple.edu. A couple of housekeeping items. You'll see on your screen, on your upper right corner, if you have some questions about tonight's topic, type in the Q&A box, click the question mark symbol at the top right of your screen to open that box, and then you simply type your question right there down at the bottom here. You can see the illustration on the screen. So we do encourage questions, and we will have a question and answer period. And for participants with confidential questions, we will also have a 10-minute question and answer period at the end of the session that will not be recorded. In fact, this session is being recorded, and it will be archived and put up on our website in about 2 weeks. So as I said, there is a period of time, if you have a confidential question, that we will not be recording those questions. So I just want to mention before I introduce Dr. Regli to you that we do ask for your feedback on this session and all of our sessions. We have a SurveyMonkey link that is going to pop up after Brian's presentation. So we do encourage you to please give us your feedback, because this program is all about you, the families who are working in the private schools and the non-traditional school settings, and we really want to be as responsive as possible to you and your issues. So again, without further ado, I want to introduce Brian Regli, who's going to take it away.
Good afternoon and evening. My name is Brian Regli. I'm here today to talk to you about cyber safety, cyber security, but I want to put that within the context of a digital playground. The companies that have built interactive games, social media platforms, communication devices, all of these companies are building digital playgrounds. And the children and the young adults that are in our care play in those digital playgrounds. And sometimes bad things happen in those playgrounds because these are beautiful places, places of great fascination and great opportunity and great diversion. And ultimately, there are vulnerabilities in that playground. In the same way that you build a wonderful playground in the real world, any town manager will tell you that crime happens in those spaces. So my goal tonight is to share with you research that was conducted by my company, Drakontas, through grants from the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Assistance. From 2009 through 2013, I had the honor of working with literally dozens of law enforcement jurisdictions throughout the United States, training them on the vulnerabilities in these gaming platforms and how crimes can be committed and how people can be exploited in those platforms. So what I'm going to present to you tonight is essentially an extracted version of the materials that we would use to train law enforcement officers to identify crimes and to essentially investigate crimes on these digital playgrounds. By the same token, I'm also approaching this as a parent of 2 children, one of whom has autism, and who has experienced in my home challenges associated with cybercrime. So we're not going to get into the high-end issues of, who's hacking who or the most recent set of headlines that you're going to find about cybercrime. We're going to get into some practical issues around how individuals interact with this technology, how the interactions of this technology can lead to potential vulnerabilities for those individuals, and how you as a parent or a caregiver working with an individual with disabilities may be able to help guide them to better outcomes and to safer outcomes. Now, as a researcher, my background is in technology. As a parent, I understand something about having a child with disabilities, but I am not an expert on disabilities themselves. So what I'm sharing with you tonight is fundamentally research about law enforcement, and it's about crime, and it's about challenges in cybersecurity and cyber safety. It's not necessarily about some of the deeper psychological elements or social elements that may come with that, but obviously I will touch on that. To the framework by which I'll communicate these pieces, I wanted to start by giving you a sense of the landscape. What are the components in these digital playgrounds? And before I dig too far into it, if at any time you have questions, and you can pose them through the QA window that's available to you that Kathy's already described, I'll try to incorporate answers to questions along the way, so feel free to begin to populate questions as we go, and then we'll have that 10-minute period at the end for any questions that you'd like to have outside of the scope of the presentation. So this framework, what is the technical landscape, the social media elements that your children and adults and everyone are working with in the digital playgrounds? There's 4 elements that I want to talk about, and this is a framework that was developed by Dr. Robert DeVideo at Drexel University's Criminal Justice Department, so I have to give my colleague Rob credit for this. Collaboration, communication, entertainment, multimedia. All of these are experiences that a user will have in a digital playground, and they all depend upon each other. Because companies who build these digital playgrounds, they're creating opportunities for individuals to interact with each other. They're trying to create stickiness. They're trying to help those individuals build relationships. The more relationships they have, the more likely they are to stay there. So if you're a Facebook aficionado the way I am, it feels great to have all of these friends. If you're an Instagram person like my daughter is, it's great to have hundreds, thousands of followers. And they rely upon each other. You collaborate, you communicate, and there are entertainment components that you share and video that you share so that all of it coheres together. But what you'll see is that different companies focus on different parts of that environment. You're all probably familiar with Wikipedia. You may be less familiar with Reddit and Dig and some of these other social bookmarking platforms that are out there. But people share information. They build Wikipedia-type environments. So if your child is a big fan of Pokemon, my son is a huge fan of Pokemon, you will find thousands of wikis out there that are all built around the history of Pokemon characters. Or if you're a big fan of, Harry Potter, same sort of thing. These are people collaborating. They're sharing experiences. They're building essentially a context for the communication that they're going to have. Communication then is layered on top of that collaboration, and in some cases you're using components like WordPress or blogs like Blogger or Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, and you're communicating. You're taking your experience and you're posting it online, publicly, in some cases to hundreds of thousands of people. And part of this as well is making yourself socially available to others and building relationships. What the companies are doing, obviously enough, is monetizing the use of those platforms. They're making money on advertising. They're making money on the user data. And so the more data they have, the more money they make. And you can imagine, again, why it's so important to have all of these relationships built within the platform. the multimedia sphere. Most of your children, or you're probably aware of YouTube, and if your children are not yet aware of YouTube, God bless them, because they seem to be living in the alternative universe that I wish my children would live in sometimes. This is where my children will spend lots of time. And there are hysterical things on YouTube, and that's a great, great entertainment platform. Think of YouTube as being a broadcast medium where I can go up and post something online. Anybody can post something online. But platforms like LimeWire and FrostWire and others, those are peer-to-peer video and music sharing platforms. Now, for those of you who are concerned about child pornography, concerned about the availability of contraband material online, these types of software that allow individuals to set up their own servers and share multimedia, video, and the like, many of these servers are very dangerous because they will contain material that is illegal. And I will talk a little bit about how these platforms are discovered by law enforcement, how they are accidentally discovered by individuals who may just be casting around on the internet and may not actually understand what they're looking at until it's too late. And they've actually committed a crime because they've downloaded information or accessed a site that they didn't realize contained contraband material. So multimedia, in its most benign form, is the entertainment that you're going to see on YouTube, which is very highly regulated, and the folks at Google that own YouTube spend a lot of time trying to police that site, and it's a very difficult thing to do. But when you encounter shared pictures and images and music, there are all sorts of environments that individuals can create, and those individuals can draw others to those sites using the communication and blogging capabilities that we've just talked about, because that's where you find and you create relationships with people online. And then finally, there's the entertainment sphere. And this is the sphere that I'm going to talk the most about, in great part because this is where people spend a tremendous amount of time. For any one of you who have a child that plays World of Warcraft, or plays Call of Duty, or plays all the games that Disney can provide, these are games that are built on social networks, that are built on attracting as many people as possible to the game, and then having people establish those relationships. And you can get that on your PC computer, or you can get it on a gaming console. Your Xbox, your PlayStation, your Wii console made by Nintendo, these have the identical capabilities as the computer does. So if you think that your child may not be able to access all the things on the Xbox that they can access on the computer, and therefore the Xbox is somehow inherently more safe, that's not true, because all of these are essentially computing devices that can be accessed and can access every network resource that they're connected to. And the same, you have a cell phone, if you have a tablet, most of these games, these entertainment sphere platforms, are being expanded to include all of these environments, as we'll talk about. So the context for these digital playgrounds are a whole wide range of capabilities that you may not be aware of. And I emphasize this every time I have this talk with folks. It is not that the companies who have built these digital playgrounds have intended to create vulnerabilities. In the same way that your town manager, when they create a beautiful playground in your community, if a sex offender shows up there, the town manager didn't intend for that. But sex offenders do show up in these environments. And we'll talk about how that happens and why that happens, because ultimately it's an open platform, and it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to police the broad scope of access that all of these entertainment, blogging, communications, multimedia sites can provide. To give you a sense of how pervasive these platforms are, how important, how central they are to our culture today, let me give you some basic statistics. And these are from the Entertainment Software Agency, which is basically a working group that's been established by the gaming companies. 59% of Americans play video games. And by that, that's everything from like Angry Birds that you're going to have on your cell phone, you're sitting in line at the food store, you're playing Angry Birds, all the way over to these super involved games like Call of Duty or World of Warcraft that can be wholly immersive. 160 million games, 21 billion of revenue. So you're talking about a substantial amount. And if you're thinking about it in terms of movies, perhaps you're a movie aficionado and you know nothing about video games. Well, Call of Duty, which is probably the most popular game created by Blizzard Activision, which is one of the big gaming companies. From 2003 to 2014, that game made $10 billion, not million, billion. Call of Duty 3, which came out in 2011, that's one of the franchises. They're up to Call of Duty 4 and now some variations thereof. That franchise alone made more money in the first 10 days after its release than the movie Avatar made in its entire international run. And Avatar is the top grossing movie in the history of movies. So it shouldn't surprise you when you start looking at how big and how culturally pervasive these entertainment environments are, how much money they make. Average gamer is 31 years old. You're not talking about 14 and 15-year-olds only, and that's very important. Even when you're in a game that you think is oriented to teens, the reality is there's going to be a lot of adults that are in those games as well. This isn't just about men. Half of the gamers, almost half of the gamers, are women over the age of 18, and I can tell you my daughter, who is younger than that, is an avid gamer. And she's someone who uses Instagram, she's someone who plays the Disney games, and who enjoys it. She's a great student, she's neurologically typical, and she's out there and she's doing fascinating things. And a majority of the parents say video games are a positive part of the child's life. I will say that for both of my children, it has been as well. Now, obviously enough, every child is going to be different. Every adult's going to be different. I like to joke with my spouse that since I grew up in the basement playing Atari, and I think I turned out okay, it's kind of hard for me to say that video games are horrible to my children. So I happen to agree with that 56%. That does not diminish the potential dangers for them playing these games. I'm going to spend a couple of slides here now talking about the individual components that are in these games. I'm going to use different games as examples. I'm going to talk about how these vulnerabilities take place or occur or emerge from these environments. And again, I would emphasize these companies are not trying to create vulnerabilities, but they're trying to create social connections. For people with disabilities, this can be extraordinarily hard. As I'm sure you're all aware, and I have seen, there's a social isolation that occurs for many children and young adults with disabilities. They're seeking ways to connect with others. There are opportunities that come from these games, but unfortunately there are people who exploit the children and young people who are playing these games in different ways. So when you see email and text chat and voice chat and all of these individual tools, think about them as ways that your child or the young person in your care could be interacting with individuals in these games, these platforms as I call them, these software frameworks that have been built for our entertainment and our ability to interact and socialize. You may not know this game, Neopets, one of my daughter's favorite games for many years. You get a Neopet, you play with your Neopet. There's actually email built into your Neopet platform. So you may, again, think that your kid's just playing a game, but there's actually the ability to communicate with others. This is not surprising if you've used Facebook or if you've used something like, Words with Friends, which is what Zynga here is built. For those of you who remember, Alec Baldwin, the actor, got himself thrown off an airplane because he was so engrossed in this game, they refused to stop playing it. And there are all levels of interaction associated with them. So the point of this game, the point of Neopets, the point of almost every environment you've created is to share it with others and then to interact with those individuals. So when you're creating a username, it's asking you for information about yourself. When you are interacting with others, quite often in these games, you have visibility into who these other people are. You may actually be able to know where they are because the GPS information, the Global Positioning Satellite information that's embedded in your phone will actually be logged in the picture that you post or in the chat message that you put forward. So all of these individual components could potentially create vulnerabilities. Beyond the one-to-one text chat that allows individuals to communicate with other individuals, there's also broadcast text. This is a screenshot from a platform called Habbo that was actually shut down about 1.5 years ago by the British government because it was being used to broadcast all sorts of sexually explicit information. The average age of children registered in Habbo was about 14.5, 15 years old. And the point of Habbo was cohabitation. The idea was that you would basically get a room and you would be able to build your room, furniture in your room and the like. You'd actually earn money walking around these hotels, but then you'd walk into these sexy singles with bedroom and you would have very explicit sexual content that appeared and invitations to go off onto separate chat rooms and have individual one-to-one conversations. So again, this is a platform that was built to create social cohesion. But at the same time, it can be used to essentially fish for people who are ripe for exploitation, unfortunately. Many of these platforms have voice chat built into it. So if you think your child is not talking to somebody else because they're not using a phone, well, you may be wrong because they may be actually talking through the application itself. This is a platform called Second Life. You may have heard of it. It's one of the more popular avatar-driven, self-creating games, essentially. And you can make phone calls within it. And you can't keep track of them because they're not logged. So if you're trying to figure out who your child called, you're probably not going to be able to figure that out either. Video chat is an integrated part of many of the video games that are out there, many of the environments that are out there for social media. You can now do video chatting on Skype. You can do video chatting in Facebook. This is something that becomes more and more pervasive. Interestingly enough, in a place like Xbox 360, and again, if you're not familiar, Xbox is a Microsoft gaming platform, PlayStation has its own platform, Nintendo's got the Wii platform. This is true in PlayStation as well. You can spin up a video camera. You can have a video chat with the person you're playing with. You have a little box in your upper right-hand corner and see that person in real time. You can post videos. You can have conversations with people. And essentially, again, none of this is logged. One of the most interesting applications that we found is in the case of drug sales. Many drug distributors have begun to realize that Xbox Live and the video chat feeds can be used for that purpose and will coordinate the moving of contraband material by making video calls on Xbox. You can find lots of interesting stories like that in the public media, and I can tell you from personal experience that many of them are true. There are economics behind these games. So when you are building a software platform and you're trying to figure out ways to monetize that platform and to maximize your revenues, in an ideal world, you create opportunities for people to buy into the games or transact in the games. So for those of you who have bought or purchased software or apps for your children, or you have seen this in the past, you know, it bears repeating. There is no such thing as a free lunch, and there is no such thing as a free application. Even if the application is free, obviously they're going to be pushing advertising at you, and they're going to monetize your behaviors. Most likely, it's going to be a freemium game, which means it's free, but then there are premium elements in it. So now you can buy 10 gems to complete your purchase for 99 cents. And you can store your credit card information there, and then all of a sudden your child, without knowing it, has bought literally $450 of special berries in the Smurfs game that was downloaded onto their iPad, and you wonder why your credit card bill just ran up. That's a real example. That's actually an example from my daughter. But it's also something that became the subject of a class action lawsuit that was pushed against Apple for not being able to control its in-app purchases on the Apple iTunes Store. So this is a known problem, and they have changed it through the years, but it is still a known problem. And it gets even more complicated than that. It's one thing to have an app where you have a couple little things that you buy, or the different pieces of it, and we can talk about how it exploits individuals who may not be aware of the purchases that they're making, but it's getting bigger than that. Within these games and within your mobile devices and your new iPhone 6 and the next generation of mobile devices, there are payment platforms. The goal of these companies is to replace your bank or to amplify your bank, to do different things with your credit cards. And in fact, these games have currencies built into them in some cases so that people can become financially invested in the platform, not just socially invested. This is real money that we are talking about here. The example on this slide, micropayments where I'm buying gems, a $330,000 space station. Brian, how do you know it's a $330,000 space station? Well, the game is Entropia Universe. And Entropia Universe is a game that's built out of a Scandinavian country. It's a company that actually has a banking license for its game. It has a fixed exchange rate of 10 Ph.D, which is the currency in the game, for $1. You can transfer money in and out of the game. And in fact, what they do is they auction real estate off in the game. So essentially, they'll create a new planet or a new space station and give rights to the individual who purchases the space station. And that person can then charge individuals who come to the space station to fight or to hunt or to gather, essentially taxing them. So what they've done is they've created a real estate deal. So if your child ever comes into your room and says, I've lost my $250 sword because someone stole it from me, it's actually possible that your child does have a sword that's worth $250 in some virtual universe that has a real economic value in the real world. So you can imagine the level of complexity that begins to arise when you start looking at property rights in these environments. And again, I'm not going to go into great depth, but I want to illustrate this, that in Europe there have actually been arrests that have been made for people who have stolen virtual goods in these video games. That hasn't happened in the United States, to my knowledge. There have been lawsuits, civil lawsuits that have been applied in different circumstances regarding intellectual property issues in video games. What does this mean to a parent or a caregiver who has an individual with a disability who may be into a game, really invested in a game? The threats are not just social, the threats are economic. There is real value that is being created in these games, so you have to be aware of that. You have to understand when a crisis arises, because it's inevitable that a crisis will arise, that there are elements that you're going to have to deal with, you're going to have to address to understand how to move forward in these circumstances. And the gaming companies themselves are struggling with what this all means. Facebook, for instance, is just about to launch its payment platform, so if you're not aware of this, in about 2 or 3 more months, you're going to be able to literally pay somebody else on Facebook by just clicking a button. And if you've set up your bank account information and they've set up their bank account information and you're out and you're trying to split the tab, well, you can just split the tab. Once you can enable that kind of capability where someone can make a transaction without even thinking, you can imagine the potential complexities that arise for an individual that may not understand the social and financial consequences of their actions. Given the economic value of these accounts, there's also the reality of cybercrime hacking against those accounts. 44 million World of Warcraft accounts stolen a few years ago. This happens constantly. You've heard about Sony, I'm sure, getting the PlayStation accounts hacked over and over and over again. Credit card information, personal information, gaming information. You can get more on the dark nets, which is the kind of the phrase of art for all the different places where black market information is sold. You can find out anything about anybody, and it's awfully cheap, unfortunately. Exploiting it at scale is the problem for these individual companies. But then you can get really small examples. And again, I'll use my daughter as an example. She has about 2,000 followers on Instagram for her account. She's a great fan of My Little Pony. For those who are not My Little Pony aficionados, I don't recommend it, but I've seen more of them than I'd like to admit. She began to communicate with someone that she felt was a friend. And she told them, yeah, you can share the account. And you can post some things on the account. Well, one evening, I heard a scream from my daughter because all of a sudden her account was stolen and the password had changed. She couldn't get back into it. Fortunately, after about 15 minutes, I figured out the person didn't really do a particularly good job at hacking it. I was able to hack it back. I was able to recover the account. I became my daughter's favorite dad for about 24 hours, and then I reverted to being the typical old dad that a 14-year-old girl would yell at from time to time. But this made me proud. I was lucky. She was lucky. The reality is these accounts have real value to people, and that value is sometimes hard to understand if you're not as into the games or into the social platforms as the individual you're responsible for caring for. Recognize the fact that these games are pervasive, as we talked about. They're trying to push them farther and farther. These companies are trying to push them as far as they can because, again, the more you use the games, the more material they have to sell to others, the more advertising they can push at you, the more freemium services they can push out you. And it's gotten to the point where in the case of Blizzard Activision, you actually can get the equivalent of a token for those of you who are in the banking industry or know people in the banking industry or have super secure accounts. These basically require you to get a token authorization from your phone or from a device, a token device that they will send to you because they know that your account has economic value. If you play Diablo 3, which is one of the most recent games that Blizzard Activision came out with, you actually have a trading platform where you can trade objects that you have earned or fabricated in the game, and some of the objects are worth hundreds of dollars. I've met people who have made thousands of dollars playing video games and selling objects in their free time. I had one police officer who came to my training say, the reason why I came to the training is because I made more money playing video games last year than I made as a police officer. So don't underestimate the economic power of this market. So you now know that this world of video games and online communities is big, it's huge, it's economically voluminous, it is an important part of our culture, and people are playing and interacting through all of these platforms and all of these capabilities. A couple of headlines that scare me as a parent and probably scare you. Here's a situation where someone friended a girl online on the PlayStation 3. Playing games on the PlayStation 3 using the video chat. Convinced her, befriended her, convinced her to send pictures of her 11-year-old girl across a network that PlayStation obviously can't monitor for every single thing that goes on. It's very, very difficult to do. I can get into the technology of it. It's extraordinarily difficult to police these things. This is the kind of stuff that happens. Now, fortunately, again, this person was put back behind bars. Another example. Sex offenders. For those who don't know the terminology, sex offenders level 3 is the worst sex offender that you're going to have. There are different levels of sex offenses. I'm not an expert at it, but I can point you to experts in that field if you need it. The reality is anybody can register online as anything under any identity. It is impossible to know if this person is a sex offender because they could use a fictitious name, they could use fictitious credit card information, social security numbers, whatever it happens to be. So here's an example of someone who basically had a substantial amount of child porn photos online and then distributed them through the Xbox Live to individuals who may not have even known what they were about to receive. Slightly more benign, but emotionally very shocking. If your children play Minecraft, both my children love Minecraft. My daughter, my son, both love Minecraft. If you are in that environment and you're on a server, because people can create their own servers, they can invite people to go onto those servers and play Minecraft because it's an open source piece of software. You can play it on Xbox, you can play it through Microsoft. Microsoft bought it, but there are still free versions out there. You can build something up, you can spend hours and hours and hours, and someone could literally log onto your server, get administrative rights, and start destroying everything that you built. These are called griefers. So you can again imagine the investment that a child may make, someone who is particularly obsessive about a type of online activity, and all of a sudden they see all of their work disappear. There's obviously bullying as well in these environments, and I'll give an example now from my son, who is very, very obsessive about his DeviantArt account. For those who don't know DeviantArt, just because my son says he's a deviant, it doesn't mean he's a deviant in that way. Deviations. The idea is that you get a character and you deviate the character, or you create new types of characters, or you create deviations. So my son, who wants to be an animator when he grows up, got tremendous visual memory. Obviously enough, he puts himself out there. He will try to do role-playing with other kids who maybe are more socially and verbally dexterous than he is. And he will find it hard to keep up, and then kids will essentially shuttle him off or throw him out of groups. He will get back into another group. And he's found some groups that are very accepting. He's found other groups that are very exclusive. And it feels like I'm back in kindergarten watching kids, kick each other in the shins. That's the online world, unfortunately. And there are tremendous emotional consequences in these worlds as well. And then finally, the connection between the economic incentives in the game can create some very perverse outcomes. So here's a kid who's playing Call of Duty, he's 10 years old, and he really wants to get the cheat codes because the cheat codes allow him to get the super weapons that allow him to kill the things that he wants to kill and maybe even take video of it and post it online. And if you've not watched a walkthrough of Call of Duty or any of the other thousands of games that are posted on YouTube, I don't recommend it, but people think this is really important. My son loves watching walkthroughs, so there is an ego thing to be able to say, hey, I got a cheat code, this is what I did. Oh, if you take a picture of your genitals, I'll give you the cheat codes. So you can imagine, again, someone who is not socially aware or sexually aware or who understands the legal consequences of their actions, suddenly in a situation where the economic opportunity or the social opportunity overcomes whatever resistance they should have, that moral centeredness that they need to have in order to prevent something like this from hurting them. So I'm going to give you a couple of slides here as I come to the end of our presentation to talk about the kind of the psychological elements, the social elements, And you'll note in the very bottom here, there's a couple of names at the bottom. I'm borrowing slides from a colleague of mine, Rick Parsons. Rick is the head of probation and parole from Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, someone who also contributed to my research, and we did significant work together interviewing sex offenders and going to houses where sex offenders lived and talking about their technology use and talking about their gaming use. And what Rick likes to talk about in terms of the individuals that we got to interview and the folks who struggle with online sexual behavior is that there really are things that hook people in these environments. And it's difficult to identify when that hook occurs and then how to help people manage that relationship. So this is really the work of David Delmonico that you see here. He's a professor at Duquesne University. There's a website called internetbehavior.com that Dr. Delmonico runs. I've had the chance to talk to him a couple of times, but he's a well-known researcher in the field. Part of what you struggle with, especially for someone who may not be as socially aware because of their disabilities, is that the internet, it really matches to your personality and mood. If you're in the mood to beat something across the head, you can go in and beat something across the head. It can match to different disorders. It can match to different pathologies. On the one hand, you can feel very active because you're clicking and you're beating, you're hitting, but on the other hand, you're in the same spot over and over again, and you're getting stimulation without necessarily going out into the world, and then the empathy that you need for social interaction is not necessarily as clear because you're not interacting directly with individuals. Now, this is the sort of slide that makes many parents say, my God, I want to turn off these computers. I never want my child to play with them again. The problem is the modern world that we live in is so enmeshed with technology. It's an integral part of how everybody relates to each other. Every neurologically typical child, my daughter's friends, boy, if you took away their cell phones, they would not have any way to interact with each other. So a person with a disability, if you take that tool away from them, it's going to make them even more isolated. So how do you help them understand the limitations of the platform that they are working in, be it a video game or Facebook or Instagram or Tumblr or you name it, okay? They need to understand that computer and gaming systems permit, and this is the work of Al Cooper, a psychologist, anonymity, accessibility, affordability. You can buy this stuff very inexpensively. You don't have to be who you are online. You got to be very careful about who you interact with. And you have to know that the digital footprints that they leave behind and the digital signature that they put on the document and the digital presence that they create is not the who on the other side of the computer screen. And by the same token, you, the individual, the user, the child, the person we're protecting, it's also, you're not in the computer, right? That sexual image that you just found, that's not a real woman. That, deviation that you found that's just not really appropriate, that's not a real person. The real people are outside. And the moment that you feel that the world in the computer is more real than the world outside of the computer, you have a problem, because then you're going to start saying and doing things that you would not normally say or do in that environment. Internet grooming, the police community will tell you that's the thing that concerns them most. That's what the Internet Crimes Against Children task forces throughout the United States focus on, are finding individuals who are sexual predators online, who are trying to bring people into relationships or share content with them that is inappropriate. And this is something that is a real issue. Individuals with autism found with child pornography, not necessarily knowing what they are looking at, because they accessed a peer-to-peer network and all of a sudden they find themselves with contraband and there's a knock on the door because the police are monitoring many of these peer-to-peer relationships, these peer-to-peer networks. These are the things that are concerning to me as a parent and to many parents who I've talked to. Children need to understand, youth need to understand that the friendship that they're potentially making online, if they're being flattered into an environment where a relationship is being formed, they're being asked to share pictures, share passwords, share individual information, share an address, share a personal phone number, that's usually the beginning of something bad. And especially when you start getting to a point where someone's saying, look, this is between you and me and don't tell your parents, and this is something that we need to have, and if you tell your parents this, I'm going to break off our friendship. These are the sorts of things that are obviously warning signals, because once you've gotten back to that point where essentially the child has, or the young adult has shut you off from that conversation, there is a real issue. So if you encounter something like that occurring, there are a variety of ways in which you can take action. On a formal side, there are places you can go, information you can find. This will be archived, as Kathy has said, so I'm assuming that if you're interested, you will go back, you will take a look at some of these resources. There are a variety of websites out there as well that are strong, recommendable websites you should consider looking at to understand what the challenges are. And many of these are funded by U.S. government sources as well, so there are ways to reach out, either to the Department of Justice that has a computer crimes division. You will find online phone numbers for the Internet Crimes Against Children task forces in your community. I know many of the people who are here listening today are probably from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You'll find the main one is I believe in Delaware County still, if my memory serves. But there are nationwide efforts to combat exploitative crimes against children. But on a practical level, here's some things I would suggest. As in all things, the most difficult thing for a parent to do, it's what I struggle with every day. I assume I will struggle with it for the rest of my life. How do you talk to your kids about this? What are some of the questions you should ask? If you don't play games yourself, or you don't use social media yourself, and your children do, I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you start. Even if it's something that you don't feel comfortable with, even if it's something you think is silly, you don't have the time for it, create a Facebook account, create an Instagram account. If they're playing Call of Duty, sit down and play Call of Duty for a couple hours. It's difficult, it can be frustrating, but trust me, it will give you a context that you really desperately need in order to talk to them. Because from there, you're going to be able to talk about the games, and you're going to be able to have a conversation, and you're going to be able to talk about the social environments. Now, if you are concerned about hours of playing at night and the like, some basic guidelines. If your child has a gaming platform or a television or a computer in their bedroom, I would strongly advise you to take it out of their bedroom. I don't care if they're neurologically typical. I don't care if they're, disabled. I don't care. The reality is these are social platforms. All of these games, you are putting stuff out into the public. If your child believes that they can sit in their room and do something secret, the point I have made to my children is this: everything that you're doing is available online to anybody who is looking. Why would you hide it from me? And one of the rules for sex offenders that you go out and you monitor is that computers cannot be in bedrooms, and video game platforms cannot be in bedrooms, because you want to create the possibility of public interaction that serves as a framework, as a context for the games that are being played and the events that are occurring online. So you can talk to people about the games. You want your child talking to other kids about the games that they're playing. You actually want kids to go over to their houses together and play games. I mean, yeah, I wish it was kind of like it used to be, where we all go out and play baseball or football or beat each other up. But this is the way kids play today, and there are good positive interactions that come from it. If your child is open with you about problems that are occurring online, things that are offensive, hateful things that happen online, this is the ideal situation to be in as a parent. You want to be responsive to that. You want to be able to help as best you can. You need to remind them, obviously enough, that what happens in the virtual world is virtual. It's not the real world. It's not your relationship with another human being necessarily. It's not your relationship with you as a parent and that person as a child or the person you are taking care of. These are the things that will allow individuals to extract themselves from the digital playground that they're playing in and create a better framework for their social interaction with others. So a couple of things to think about here as I've come to the end. The digital playgrounds that children are playing in, young adults are playing in, that adults are playing in, that women are playing in, that men are playing in, these are beautiful playgrounds. This is how we are entertaining ourselves. And the companies who have built these playgrounds did not intend for them to be exploited, did not intend for cybercrime to be an issue, did not intend for cyber safety to be infringed upon. They certainly didn't intend for the economic framework that they have created to be exploited by those who wish to exploit the economic vulnerability of others. They certainly do not intend people with disabilities to be socially violated or sexually violated. But these environments contain vulnerabilities. The only way that we can combat it as adults and as parents and as caregivers and as citizens of these digital universes is by participation. By participation with the child or individual in your care, by participation in those digital communities, and by advocating for your child, for the person you are taking care of, and helping them understand the positive lessons that they're going to learn in these environments and how they relate to some of the challenges they may experience in the real world. But always to remind them that the real world is the tangible, physical world that is in front of them. It is not the virtual world they've created, be they so enmeshed in that virtual world or so invested economically, socially in that virtual world, so that there is an opportunity to disconnect from it, to learn from it, and then hopefully to create a stronger personality, stronger individual, stronger ability to relate to the world by learning from those digital worlds and by playing in those digital playgrounds. So it's 7:50. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you've got. I haven't seen any questions pop up so far. Hopefully you're all listening and enjoying what you're hearing, or at least making some notes as you go. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to hear them. There's that moment as a presenter where you feel that you've either worn people out and they're not interested necessarily in asking the questions, or they are trying to process what was said, or they've fallen asleep. I'm hopeful that the 26 people here attending right now have not fallen asleep. I will add a couple of quick thoughts as we wind through the last 9 minutes that I've been afforded. And if anybody interrupts along the way with a question, I'll move directly to that question. There are groups out there in the law enforcement community that are monitoring Sorry, I thought I heard an audio stream come in for a moment, but I can't hear anything at this point. There are law enforcement resources that are monitoring activities online, obviously enough. But you can imagine that there's a limitation given the volume of transactions and communications that occur in all of these virtual worlds and online communities. I will tell you that many of the companies that I've referred to do have the equivalent of community managers, of security officers, of individuals who work in those games. So hopefully you feel or you learn about those investments and feel comfortable that these companies are doing their best. I've just been posed a question. My advice on tablets or iPad use in the bedroom. This is a bit of a difficult one simply because mobile devices are by definition mobile. What I generally recommend is you ask the child to keep the door open and you go through the iPad every now and again, not every single time because you don't want to become obsessive about it, frankly, from my experience. But every now and again, you go back through the history on the iPad, specifically the browser history, and you spend some time making sure that the child understands what the apps are on the machine and what those applications do. And you make absolutely sure that you do not enable any in-app purchases. So when you download an application that has this freemium component to it where you can buy gems or buy tools or buy something, generally speaking, they give you an option to turn on or turn off the purchases in the platform. So I would strongly advise you to make sure that these are all turned off and make sure that your daughter understands that if something pops up and says, hey, buy this, that she has to come to you before she continues playing the game so that you can assess what the nature of the message is. There's a second question that came in on the chat line. Definitely awake, so I appreciate that there's an individual who says they're definitely awake, overwhelmed. Okay, well, thank you. So you posed a very difficult question about how to help children in a family who are all playing the same game, how they work together. What I would suggest is that you identify games that involve multiple players. And you help ask the elder siblings or ask the siblings to participate with it, because many of these games provide for collaborative opportunities. World of Warcraft is a great example, and I don't know if that's the best one for your family, but you can get together 2 or 3 or 4 people on the same server, playing the same game in the same environment, and interacting together and working together. And I have found that my daughter and my son, when they get together and they start working on something together, even if it's a 2-player game like a Mario Kart type game, or one of the sort of little pop-up game type things that you can get on the Nintendo Wii, that it forces my son, who has social limitations, to interact in a different way. And my daughter, who loves her brother, is happy to kind of work with his differences, and it's really made a difference in their lives. So I think the best thing to do is to find games that require them to collaborate and to work as a family to figure out how best to collaborate. And this is where, again, I would suggest you play a couple games too. And I don't know if you're a gamer, I don't know if it's something you enjoy, but I really strongly recommend that to you. So hopefully that answers your questions. So another question about software and apps to block activities in websites and devices. There are certainly a number of them that are available, and I wouldn't be well positioned to commercially recommend one over another. You will find that there are what are called firewalls that you can get when you buy a home wireless router that have pre-built into them certain restrictions. You will find that there are internet service providers out there that will actually build it into your network access. There are ways you can install things on your individual computer. So there are a number of devices or software apps out there. Again, I don't feel comfortable recommending one over another, but with some internet searching, you're going to find a good number of them. Stick with brand names that you know, Norton, Symantec. There are ones out there that are specific for child pornography. They're usually built in sort of very, very limited ways, so I wouldn't go after something that's highly specialized. I would go after something that's good general family use, unless you feel that there is a specific concern, and then you will have to dig a little bit deeper. But if there is a specific concern and you'd like to follow up with Kathy here, I can dig into my archives. I might be able to make some specific suggestions. Feel free to email her, and I will follow up with you. What is Snapchat? Is another question that just popped up. Snapchat is an application that emerged a couple of years ago that sells itself as a image sharing platform. I can take a picture on my phone, I can send it to somebody else, and that image actually expires after a specified period of time, usually 30 to 45 seconds. Snapchat has sold itself as a completely anonymous environment where I can take the picture and it's going to disappear and there will be no record of it on my phone or on that person's phone. I can tell you that that is not true. I can tell you that law enforcement has been able to extract everything and anything from those devices that Snapchat has been able to produce. So if your child believes or you believe that somehow the naked picture that you've received or sent on Snapchat is not available to law enforcement, you are wrong. And that's the reason why I believe Snapchat to be fairly pernicious, frankly, and I apologize for saying that because I shouldn't make comments about companies, but the reality is I don't like it. I don't like what it represents, and I've never allowed my children to use it. Another question here about laws to protect minors from being tried as criminals if they inadvertently commit crimes. Unfortunately, crimes are not wholly about the intention of the individual. And I've had conversations with various parents about, a child with autism that does not understand the social context, is not able to understand that this is sexually exploitative material, and why would my child be branded as a sex offender? It's not fair. Unfortunately, if the law were to try to carve out an exception for individuals with autism, then every sex offender in the United States would suddenly claim they have an autism diagnosis. It is extraordinarily difficult to find the line between intentionality and possession of contraband, which is essentially what it is. On a case-by-case basis, a judge or a law enforcement officer can choose in their discretion to change the legal process for that individual. Ultimately, it is very, very difficult for the law enforcement community to address that, and I have many friends in the law enforcement community that really struggle with this problem. So there isn't a law that says, oh, I didn't intend to get child porn. There's also not a law that doesn't say, oh, my child is using my cell phone and they're now putting me up for charges because it's on my cell phone. That has happened too. If your child is using a cell phone in your name and ends up in contraband or having contraband on that device, you're the one who can get prosecuted. So unfortunately, there's no good way around this except to monitor your channels as best as possible, manage the relationship that your child has with the technology, and talk to them, and after you're done talking to them, talk to them a little bit more, and participate with them, because these are social platforms, these are digital environments that are meant to involve you and your children and their siblings. If they're going to be on that environment, leverage that capability, leverage that opportunity. That is probably the best advice I can give. So a couple of final questions here. How much time do you consider appropriate, daily or weekly? It's hard for me to say. It depends on the child. You know, as a young child, I like separating out the weekday from the weekends. You know, the weekday, especially with school, especially with homework, they're trying to create essentially a sense of isolation. Now, most children are going to see that you use technology on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, that you are on Facebook, that you are watching something on television, so why can't I? At some point, that has to break open because you have to treat them as adults, as they become adults, certainly. So I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule that I would suggest, but I do suggest, strongly suggest, that you set boundaries and you make those boundaries consistent and logical. And so for me, the weekend, weekday thing is probably a good component of that. One last question here. How could a child purchase games, gems in a game with a bank card? Okay, so if you have signed up for iTunes, there is a vulnerability, which they've closed in part. If you buy something on iTunes, an application you download, depending on how you set up your configuration, for the next 10 minutes, you can buy anything you want on iTunes without reauthorizing it. So the example that I gave you about the berries in the Smurfs game is actually because I downloaded the game, handed it to my daughter, and said, hey, go for it. And this happens to a lot of parents. And all of a sudden, because she was within the 10-minute window, she had bought $60 of berries. If you buy something on Google Play, for instance, and you store your credit card information, and you hand the cell phone to the 15-year-old because the cell phone is what you gave to the 15-year-old who's going to school, the credit card information is there. They can start downloading stuff onto the phone. So you have to recognize the persistence of the information, of the credit card information, of bank card information on the device. Now, if you're conscious of that and you remove it all the time, you only use it as one-time purchases, or you set up the account and you remove it, which is what I do, then it's not going to happen. But if you don't, then it can happen. One comment that was just made here in the chat window, which I absolutely agree with, most people who use these technologies don't necessarily understand the vulnerabilities that they expose themselves to. And again, it's not because, you know, Facebook wanted to create vulnerabilities. It's because they wanted to create social relationships, and social relationships can always beget misunderstandings and exploitation. That's where I think the communication needs to start. People need to understand, youth need to understand, people who are, you know, who have certain disabilities in particular need to understand the social context of their online behavior. They also need to understand the economic consequences of their online behavior. So those are the elements that become part of the conversation that you're having with your child or with the person in your care. All right, so I am now, I believe, through the recorded portion. Sorry, go ahead.
So we are now going to turn off the recording so that those of you that would like to ask questions privately so that will not be recorded can now do so.